Welcome, everyone, back to the podcast of champions. I'm David Woods from Bruin Report Online, the UCLA site on the 24/7 Sports Network.
And I'm Ryan Abraham from USCFootball.com, the USC site on the 247 Sports Network. And together we make the podcast of champions, talking all things formerly Pac-12 football. We've been doing our kind of deep dive team by team. We were starting in the future Big 12 schools. We had to take a little pause because UCLA had some disruptions going on, and we're back. And we're going to talk about the Utah Utes. They could go into the Big 12 and just dominate. Steve Bartle from utezone.com is joining us live here on the program. Steve, thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah, no problem. It's my wedding anniversary today, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be than right here with you two.
You're not saying that loud.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Please don't say that loud in your own house, unless she's not there.
Yeah, no, she knows. She's in on the bit. She knew.
That's awesome. Well, we're really gonna, talk some Utah Utes football, and we are live on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching, you can put a question, comment, or whatever in there. We will try to convey whatever you want to say to Steve. We'll put it in there too. If you just put question in the front, if you have a funny comment, I will try to put that up on the screen. You can also, if you're listening on the podcast version of this, you can leave us a 5-star review, rate us wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate that very much. You can email us, pac12podcast@gmail.com. I think we only got one email this week, so get on that, people. And you can leave us a voicemail or send us a text, 424-532-0678. Our resident voicemail stalker Perk is going to leave us another voicemail, so we'll play that one a little bit later on. But Steve, thanks again for coming in. I really want to dive deep into what's going on with the Utah Utes. I guess we should start with the man who's coming back. He's in Jake Browning territory now.
He's beyond Jake Browning territory.
Is he beyond Jake Browning territory?
This is far beyond Jake Browning.
I want to know for Big 12 Media Day if Cam Rising and Brent Keefe will both be there representing Utah, because they were there last year and neither of them played a down for the Utes. So it would be great to have them repeat. But we got those two guys coming. We got to start with Cam. Cam Rising, Steve. He's back. Again.
He is back.
2 more years of eligibility. Back. Is that 2 years of eligibility left? Is that correct? Or I'm not.
22. That's 22 more years of eligibility. That's what that is. Yeah, man, he's back. He's going to run it back, and it's interesting with Cam and Brent. We were joking around this past season of whether Brent and Cam were going to walk again. They've already walked as seniors on senior day twice, and now they'll have an opportunity to make it 4 times. In the Big 12. So pretty unique situation for those two to have the opportunity to walk in on senior day. They've been around for a long time, but with that time, man, these guys are leaders. They're veterans. They've seen it all. There's not much they haven't seen at this point. And so, Utah's riding high with those two coming back, and as they make that transition to the Big 12, there's a lot of confidence with those two coming back and just that veteran presence that they provide on the field.
Yeah. Cam Rising is going to be 25 this year. He turns 25 in May. And that's not a rarity for like players on Utah or in Utah schools. But usually there's a big gap in there where they've gone to like Belize or something.
Right.
He's just straight from high school into college, and now he's entering his 7th year as a 25-year-old. Amazing.
Yeah. No, I think. Oh, sorry, Dave. I think Cam McCormick has set the precedence. He's out there setting the pace for everybody to follow.
What's he on? 9 or 10?
I think Cam McCormick is on year 9. He's just collecting these NIL checks now. Cam, he's following. No, I'm just kidding. But it's been quite the journey for Cam. In particular, he was a 2018 recruit, goes to Texas, red shirts, transfers, has to sit out the year, COVID, couple injuries, season-ending injuries, and now he's here for his 7th year. And Brant too. I think Brant is a 7th year too. I think.
Yeah, he'll be
And
25 in December.
it's just crazy. 25. That's nothing. In the state of Utah, that's a freshman at BYU. So it's nothing new here in Utah. A 25-year-old starter.
with Cam, so this was interesting to me last year because it felt like there was a lot of mixed messaging and a lot of I don't know, cross signals between the coaching staff, Cam Rising, his doctors, the whole thing. And I don't know if I was reading it wrong, but it felt like there was some real tension there. It felt like he felt pressed upon to try to come back earlier than his doctors were telling him. Kyle Whittingham clearly felt like he'd been sold a bill of goods at some point, or at least that was the indications he was giving publicly. How much of that was real? How much was there actual tension here? Was there ever a threat that Cam Rising might not come back to Utah? Just kind of give us kind of the inside peek at what was going on here.
Yeah, this was quite the year, quite the season. It was very unique, and that tension, it was really real. You could feel it at for a couple of weeks. As we got to conference play, there was some real tension that you could feel. Even just being at practice with our 15-minute media availabilities, you don't get a lot of time with these guys, but even in that short amount of time, you could feel that there was some real frustration just with how the situation played out. It does feel like Kyle felt, maybe there was, miscommunication in terms of the expected recovery and all of that, but there was definitely some tension. And I think ultimately, both parties were able to kind of clear the air and get on the same page. It required Cam, essentially, providing a tell-all article in The Athletic, which was written by Chris Camrani. It was a great piece, and it really highlighted just how bad the injury was that Cam suffered in the Rose Bowl. He completely blew out his knee, and the fact that he was even back practicing, in a limited fashion, at that point, but the fact that he was back was for him, it was a big deal. Whereas the expectations all year long and all summer and coming into the season were that, he was going to be, a little bit further ahead in his recovery. I talked to people over the summer that cited, advancements in recovery and in surgeries and all these sort of things. And, it felt like there was just I don't know how this happens, but there was just a miscommunication, a misunderstanding of the recovery timeline, and it just led to frustration by both parties. But I don't think that it was ever to the point where Cam felt he needed to move on, needed to go somewhere else, or that Utah was interested in going, elsewhere. It was just frustration because, Utah wanted to, they felt they had a good team. They were competitive, and they had a chance to go 3 straight in the Pac-12. It would have been a pretty daunting task, but they felt they had a pretty good team. And it just, in the season, you're in the midst of it, and there's just frustrations. Got a little overboard, I think, and I shouldn't say overboard, but just the frustrations built up and ultimately boiled over, midway through the season. But ultimately, again, I think cleared the air, and everybody's back on the same page, and with same goal in mind moving into 2024.
The injury situation, it wasn't just you kind of have those star players that were out for the season. It just seemed like a mash unit throughout the entire year. And you gotta, kudos to Kyle Whittingham, has been doing this a long time. You're just like, oh, we're gonna have this safety play, running back, whatever it was. You're just kind of pulling people from everywhere, and it just seemed kind of crazy what they were able to kind of put together. Like, are those guys kind of healthy now, or what was, maybe kind of give your assessment of what the injury situation was like all season?
The injury situation was unlike anything I've seen in my time doing this. I think, I started once we got to week 4, I felt it was necessary to tally how many games were missed by guys in the 2 deep. And I continued to just keep track of that number. And by the end, there it was up there towards, I don't remember the exact number right now, but it was up towards 150 games lost to injury from guys, in the starting unit and in the two deep. So it was unreal. It seemed like every week there was a new injury that was pretty significant, right? You can go through the weeks and essentially there was one every week, it felt like, for the first half of the season. And ultimately, I think Lander Barton was the last big injury that happened in during the season against USC. But man, it was pretty wild there. Utah was having to rely on some guys that they didn't necessarily want to. A lot of these younger guys were redshirt guys that were forced into action. It put some freshmen into situations where they needed to be counted on when maybe they weren't necessarily ready to be counted on. But now, everybody's I'm pretty sure everybody's back, in good health, or nearing it, getting close to it. I don't think Utah suffered any, significant injuries that will extend into next season. I'd have to double check on that, but for the most part, I think a lot of the guys are getting back to good health. The big key there is Lander Barton, the guy I mentioned earlier, and his recovery. He's back and he's working out, and he's a big piece to this puzzle for next season. And so, I think he's the most important piece in terms of the injury coming back. Obviously, Cam and Brant, but they're going to be 18 months from their injury that they suffered, and they'll be in good shape. But for the most part, Utah's pretty good health and trending the right way moving forward. But yeah, it was pretty wild for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. It was an injury here, an injury there. We got to take this guy from the defense side of the ball, bring him to the offense side of the ball. Sione Vaki became one of the most dynamic two-way players, and that wasn't the plan for him at all. Like, he was going to be a defensive guy the entire way, but guys stepped up, and I think it speaks to the culture at Utah. They talk about just nobody cares. It's the next man up mentality, and the players bought into that and stepped up and helped Utah to get some wins, some big wins and some tough wins and some tough losses. But guys stepped up, and I think it just speaks to the culture up there at Utah.
So obviously a big change coming next year with Utah going to the Big 12 with the Arizona schools in Colorado. Been asking, we had Chris Cartman and Jason Shear on from the Arizona schools last couple of weeks. I don't know, like a month ago. Who knows? Time is a construct. But kind of, it's interesting the different temperatures of the fan base is for all these different schools with regard to, are they excited about it? Is there ambivalence about it? Are they actually negative about it? And the general sense was Arizona, pretty positive about it for basketball reasons. Arizona State, a little bit more trepidation. They liked being in the Pac-12. They liked the proximity to California. What's Utah's feeling about this? What's both the administrative level, but also the fan base level?
Well, I'll start with the fan base. The fan base is not too happy, with the move, right?
Yeah.
You go from, being in the Pac-12 with all these great schools, set in these great locations. It was every season you had a game to look forward to in terms of hitting the road and going to a great destination and just, again, being part of these schools. It really meant something to Utah fans who, going back over the years, right? It's been a long journey for Utah, going back to the Mountain West, right? And even before that in the WAC and all that, a lot of Utah fans have been through, some tough times, and to finally make it to the power level of college football, to be involved, to be in the same conference with these great schools that many Utah fans watched from afar, it meant a lot, and it gained a lot of value, over the course of time as Utah, started to make their own way in the conference. And so, it's tough. It's tough for Utah fans. Obviously, the administration did all that they could to try and keep the Pac-12 together, but ultimately, we're where we are, and they're looking ahead, and it'll be interesting with the move to the Big 12. Um, just expectations are high for Utah, right? You come into the Pac-12, you finally climb that mountain in the Pac-12, win back-to-back conference championships. You're returning the bulk of your football roster, and expectations are quite high, and so that's led to some interesting dialogue and interactions with fans on Twitter and online, and Big 12, with other Big 12 programs, and so Utah fans aren't necessarily endearing themselves to some of these new schools that they'll be will be competing against. But overall, I think it's tough for Utah fans to say goodbye to the Pac-12. I think Utah is going to go into the Big 12 with a certain mindset of taking care of business and wanting to establish themselves as a championship contender right away, and that's going to be the mentality that they take into the new league. Obviously, with the other sports, basketball, men's basketball in particular, it's a little bit different. That's going to be a bit of a process. Women's basketball should hit the ground running, but in terms of football, expectations are certainly pretty high for the program moving forward.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of college basketball, but it was like number 6 versus number 2 last night, Houston versus Iowa State. There's a lot of really good programs in the Big 12. On the basketball side, it'll be interesting. But I think on the football side, I think Utah's going to fit in well. I mean, obviously you got to play, BYU's there. I don't know if Utah fans are familiar with that school at all, but there's just a lot of, Utah's just been this program that's well coached and it's a really good solid program, and it seems like there's a lot of programs like that in the Big 12. So you could have rock fights week after week, with all these teams that are they don't suck, they're pretty good, and on any given day they could be really good and sometimes they're okay. But there just seems like there's a lot of kind of programs like that. So I think the storylines for Big 12 football next year are going to be good. Arizona, where are they going to be? They could be, they would look like they were rising until Fish left, but I think they're still going to be pretty good. Utah coming back with the Stars coming back. I think there's just going to be a lot of good programs in that league.
I agree, right? When you keep the focus to what's happening on the field, in the stadium, right? There's going to be a lot of competitive matchups, a lot of competitive games, a lot of good storylines. But I think for Utah fans, you're looking at the schedule and you don't see that great matchup, right? We're talking, a lot of these teams are going to be good. They're going to be, competitive, but there's not that great team like there was and has been in the Pac-12, where you always had these programs that kind of set the bar and set the mark high, right? Oregon, USC, Washington. You always had these other programs that provided these great matchups, these headline grabbing matchups. And it just feels like the Big 12, these are going to be competitive games. There's going to be interesting storylines. But is it that headline grabbing, get your attention, primetime type of game? And I think for a lot of Utah fans, there's some worry there that there's not going to be those sort of games. There's some concern. There's, again, just missing the Pac-12. But again, when you keep the focus on the field and you're looking at these teams and how competitive they'll be, it's going to be a competitive conference, right? Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, all of these programs have competed for the Big 12 championship with Oklahoma and Texas, in the conference over the last few years. Iowa State had a good run under Matt Campbell. And when you look at, a lot of these coaches across the Big 12, there's some similarities to Kyle Whittingham, as you kind of alluded to there, Ryan, in the sense that, these guys are well coached. They're going to be players that are developed over time, which is how Utah has found a lot of success as a program. So, a lot of similarities, and the football will be competitive. But it's just different. It's a different level. There's just that the marquee matchups. You're not seeing that necessarily on paper right now. But once we get to fall, I'm sure these games are still going to provide plenty of excitement.
So one thing that's always been curious to me, because there's a lot of rivalries in college sports, and there's obviously a lot of hatred and all that kind of stuff, and it's all in good fun. But there's something unique about Utah BYU that I don't see often, which is USC and UCLA, aside from a few outliers, a few crazy folk, everyone wants to see them play every year. Cal Stanford, everyone wants to see them play every year. Oregon, Washington, everyone wants to see them play every year. Utah fans, it sounds like to me when I see the tenor on Twitter, it's I never want to see those motherfuckers again in my life, and I never want to play them ever again. And I want to kind of investigate this a little bit because look, I've watched BYU play UCLA a few times, and I've never seen a more nut punching team in the history of college football, like what they do in terms of dirty play on the field. But is that the reason, or is it more than that? Like what?
No,
kind of give us the full give us the full picture here.
Education on this.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, David. There it is. We would feel great if we never played those motherfuckers again. That is, but in all seriousness, like it's a great rivalry. It's heated. It's, your neighbor is a BYU fan. Neighbor next to him is a Utah. It's so ingrained in the community here in Utah, this Utah BYU rivalry. It just extends to everything, every conversation, every little bit of life. This rivalry just finds a way to seep into, and it makes for a lot of heated debate, some delusional takes, some wild conversation, and it's interesting. So there's a lot of human elements that goes into this rivalry that makes it so heated. And it's interesting. I'm sure if you polled most Utah fans, I think most would be fine if this game wasn't played most years. If this was every couple years or so, that would be fine. It's just when your best season happens in the COVID year, or you finish in the Boca Raton Bowl and you're pounding your chest about how great a season it was and how you're going to dominate, college football because you had this kid, Zach Wilson just dominate, through the air. It's just, that's what we have to deal with, right? It's just tough, right? The fan base down there, the team down south, as some fans will call them, it's just tough. But my best, and here's the thing though, is like my best friend Jeff Hansen, who runs the BYU site for 24/7 Sports. He's my best friend, and we'll joke about it, we'll talk about it, but it's like when you get in this rivalry, it's just, man, no, there's no love lost. That's for sure.
That's funny. You can go to the stands for either one of the fans are usually pretty nice to you, but you feel like it's kind of like being nice to your face, and then behind your back, who knows what's going to happen. That's funny. That's
exactly, no, that's it. Like, it's all a front, man. It's all a front.
That's great. The Utah's known, a lot of stability in the program. You've had Kyle Whittingham there for 48 years, whatever it's been, something in that range. I think there really hasn't been much turnover on the coaching staff. You want to kind of address that, but roster-wise, we're the era with the portal and everything. We've talked about a couple of the big names coming back. What's sort of been the pulse of the roster? Like a bunch of guys left, and new guys added. Like what has that been like?
Yeah, so Utah's benefited from staff stability for a long time now, right? The staff has been together. This staff has been together only a couple years, but the bulk of the staff has been together for 8-10 years now. It's it's not common, obviously, in college football, and so in terms of the roster, Utah's been fortunate where I think they're still returning over 70% of the roster from last season. And obviously once we get into spring, that post-spring cycle, there will probably be some additional attrition that we'll see. But Utah saw 6 guys declare for the draft. Only a few of them had the opportunity to return. A couple guys were just seniors that had to move on. There were 14 portal departures. And so you're talking about the loss of 20 guys with about 5 seniors that have moved on from the program. So 25 guys total were lost this season. They're about there, which is, that's a victory in today's college football, right?
Yeah, that's on the low end for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like total,
I mean,
like to have that many guys total, like with depart. I mean, yeah, that's rare.
yeah. So it's an accomplishment for Utah to return the bulk of the roster, and this is still a roster where a lot of these guys have, whether they played or they were backing up or were on the roster, they've been, in competitive environments, competitive situations, playing competitive football. So, Utah's fortunate in that regard, and that's where a lot of the confidence comes from. Is that this is a roster that's proven that they can compete for conference championships, and so they're in good shape. They've returned a good chunk, the majority of the roster, 60-70%, somewhere in there. And then they've added, a lot of good pieces through the transfer portal. Carson Ryan, Dorian Singer, two guys that you two are familiar with. And for Utah, those are, significant additions to that wide receiver and tight end room, which will help them on that side of the ball. And then defense, they just have a way of finding guys that fit what they do, fit their persona, fit their culture, and just find success year in and year out on that side of the ball. So, overall, the roster is in great shape. They're expecting a little bit more attrition in the spring portal window, but they feel confident that they'll be able to address a lot of those departures as well.
Kyle Whittingham, as Ryan said, he's been there for between 40 and 60 years. And there was talk a couple years ago, obviously dealing with a lot of the tragic events that were happening around Utah, that he was maybe getting a little bit towards the end, thinking about retirement and all of that. What's the sense of that now? I mean, Utah is obviously embarking on a completely new challenge. Is that invigorating for him? Is it something that you think he'll want to stick around for it? And what is the succession plan now? Because I know there was Morgan Scalley was the kind of heir apparent for a while. Then he had obviously the controversy with what was it, the text messages. Yep. Where does he stand in terms of his status as next in line? Is there another option? And also, is that even something you need to be concerned about? Is Kyle Whittingham going to stay for another 5 years?
Man, like you said, it seemed a couple years ago that time was winding down, and pretty quickly. But it seems like this season, for whatever reason, he found a little bit more energy, juice to keep going. But I still think we're talking about 1 year at a time for him, and this season could be it. Maybe he decides to come back for 2025. But I think we're getting to that point where it's a year by year thing with Kyle Whittingham, and so I think that's where we're at with him. But he's in a great situation because, again, getting back to the staff continuity, and just the having that staff together for as long as they've been together now, I think that has helped him to kind of keep going. Even despite all of these new things and all of this that they have to navigate now in college football with NIL, with the transfer portal. Even with all of that, having that staff around him that's been around him for so long, that's allowed him to stick around and to find that juice and energy to keep going. So, Kyle's still, man, he's still going, he's still strong, but I think it's best to kind of take this year by year with him. So we could see him, hang it up after this season if things go a certain way. We'll see. And then after Kyle Whittingham, I think Morgan Scalley is still in a position where he's probably the odds-on favorite to succeed him. He's kind of taken on more responsibility in terms of assuming some of those head coaching responsibilities. He's been more active and vocal and more present online than what we've seen in years past. And so, he's certainly acting the part in some regards. And so we'll see. But I think I would not be surprised if, they take this to a coaching search and vet some, and just kind of go through that process. But I still think Morgan Scalley, if we're talking right now today, I still think Morgan Scalley is the favorite to succeed Whittingham.
When you go to a new conference, like if Utah goes in and wins the Big 12 in year one, I could see maybe he would retire after that. But like sometimes you just go to a new place, it's like a whole new challenge, and it could be like, oh, it's add a few years to whatever you were planning on doing. So that would be
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point, right? Is this new challenge, and he's a guy that he wants to put Utah in the best situation possible. He takes a lot of pride in what he's built, and going into that new conference with new challenges. He's the sort that he wants to succeed and overcome a lot of those challenges. So it can be reinvigorating for him, I'm sure.
I want to look at the we know the Big 12 schedule came out a month or two ago. Kind of go over that with you, and then we have a few fan questions unless you have anything else, David. But the out of conference games, Southern Utah and Baylor, which is interesting because that's a Big 12 team, but in Rice-Eccles, and then going to Utah State. And then for the Big 12 schedule, starts off at Oklahoma State, Arizona at home, followed by a road game against Arizona State, TCU at home, road game to Houston. That BYU game on November 9th. I know Amy in the chat wanted it to be rivalry weekend, but that's in Rice-Eccles. At Colorado, familiar one there. Iowa State at home, and then UCF on the road. So the final one is the long road trip all the way to Florida. But any kind of initial thoughts? No back-to-back road games or anything. Well, I guess the one the early season one, Utah State and Oklahoma State. But
yeah, literally the first road games are back to back. But yeah,
well, I mean, it's an out of conference game. It's Utah State. It's not.
It says, you don't have to travel for road games in out of conference.
You can drive to that one. It's not a flight, dumbass.
I did the same thing. I'm laughing because I did the same thing and somebody corrected me. Yeah. So I'm reliving that pain, Ryan. That's why I'm laughing.
You could drive to Logan, right? Is that's a drive?
Yeah,
right?
It's a decent drive. All
right.
Yeah, they'll probably take the buses for it. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this schedule, it sets up nicely. I think the thing that stands out most, honestly, is probably that UCF game. Thanksgiving weekend in Orlando. I think that game just jumps out as just, what are we doing here? What is going on with this schedule? But, and I think that speaks to just how nicely the rest of the schedule sets up for Utah, right? So you've got the out of conference. There's no Florida this year, which is great, but also bad, but great because, that's a tough game. That's a tough contest, and Utah doesn't need to beat themselves up to win that game again this year. But Baylor, obviously, that was an out-of-conference game that was scheduled years ago that they couldn't find a replacement for, so they keep that as a non-conference game. And then as you get into, Big 12 play, it starts on the road at Oklahoma State, and that's going to be a challenge. Oklahoma State, they're bringing back the top running back in college football. Obviously, Utah, their MO is stopping the run. That's what Kyle Whittingham preaches. It's all about the run game and stopping the run and establishing the run. So that'll be a fun contest. Coming home to Arizona. Arizona's coming off a bye before that game. And so that's going to be a really tough challenge for Utah, especially coming off of that Oklahoma State. So, getting to it right out the gate with probably two of your toughest games on the schedule against Oklahoma State and Arizona. Then you get the bye. And this is new, like the Big 12, you get two byes. Is this just new in the Big 12, or is this across the board where everybody gets two byes?
I think it's the calendar this year for whatever reason. Yeah, it's like everyone's getting two byes. I forget what the
cool. Well, I thought that was a Big 12 perk. So, geez. But Utah gets the bye after week 5, and then they get another one, I think, 4 or 5 weeks later. So it sets up nicely for them where they can kind of break this season up into thirds. They've got two 4-game stretches and then a 5-game stretch. I think that's what it is. Maybe 4. I don't know. But anyways, 2 byes spread out evenly. The second bye, obviously the week before the BYU game, and BYU also gets a bye week before that game as well. So that's the marquee matchup. When this initially came out, I was a little surprised that wasn't the Thanksgiving week, rivalry week game. That's a great rivalry. It's obviously being here in Utah, you live it every day, but that's a great game to highlight. But the Big 12 decided that they wanted to feature that game little bit earlier in the season, which I also understand, which is something that they do with Oklahoma and have done with Oklahoma and Texas playing that game earlier in the year. I'm not comparing that to the Red River shootout, but it's a very competitive rivalry, and I think getting both teams off a bye that should make for a pretty tough game. So overall, like the schedule sets up really nicely for Utah in the sense that they're coming into this wanting to compete for a championship, and there's nothing with this schedule that kind of impedes their chances at contending for a championship. There's no back-to-back roadies. There's no wild. You've got a Saturday late night game and then a Friday game the next week where you're on a short week. There's none of that.
Specials,
so yeah, a lot of those. So that's kind of nice as well. But overall, it's a solid schedule, and like I said, it sets up nicely for Utah.
We have a few questions in the chat. Do you have anything else, Dave? You want me to get into those?
No, let's go to the chat.
Okay. So Amy, our resident Utah fan, even though we love Cam, how is Utah building a better depth at the quarterback position? Pig Farmer was fine, but who will step up in case, knock on wood, Cam gets injured again?
Yeah, this season was it was a rough one for the quarterback situation at Utah. Obviously, without Cam. Kind of highlighted some deficiencies in that room. Bryson did his best. If we compare, have you guys ever been to a nuclear reactor?
No.
No, I don't think so.
I haven't either, but I've seen Chernobyl, and so I've seen nuclear reactor. There's a lot of big dials,
like up close,
little knobs.
No,
just inside. Just like what is that?
Inside
like the
reactor.
Lab. Yeah. Inside the reactor where you control things. Yeah. No, not before.
You've got rods. Yeah, I get it.
Bryson set off the reactors, what I'm trying to get to, where essentially, he had a good understanding of how the big dials were supposed to be, but the little switches to fine tune the nuclear reactor, just he didn't have a grasp of that sort of thing. And so other quarterbacks in the room weren't developed properly or just weren't at a place in their game where they could contribute and take control of the job. So, Utah with Cam coming back, they bring in Isaac Wilson from Corner Canyon, highly touted 4-star quarterback out of Corner Canyon, which has produced a lot of good quarterbacks in recent years. Devin Brown at Ohio State, Jackson Dart, USC, Ole Miss. And so you're bringing in him. You're bringing back Brandon Rose, who was injured. Freak accident in fall camp cost him the season. I think he lacerated his liver, I think is what it was.
There was a lot of internal organs that were lacerated last year, spleens and Yep.
It was pretty wild. Yeah, it was pretty wild. So the quarterback situation, Utah's got 3 in the room right now that they feel good about. Brandon Rose will be entering year 3 with the program. He's got to make strides to kind of solidify the depth here. But Utah, they weren't able to bring in a transfer quarterback during the winter portal cycle, but that's priority number 1 for them. As we move forward, they want to bring in a 4th quarterback, preferably one from the transfer portal that has D1 experience to come in and provide depth. That's going to be the big key for Utah moving forward. They want to bring in, a transfer to just really round out the depth of that room and just solidify it. So that's the hope. And then when you look ahead, in the 2025 class, they already have 2 quarterback commits. So they've also brought in this. We didn't talk about this with the staff, but they brought in Corey Dennis from Ohio State, who was the quarterback coach there. He's coming in. He's coming to Utah to be an offensive personnel analyst, kind of like akin to Cliff Kingsbury. I think that's the sort of role that he had at USC. So kind of similar there. And when you look at Corey Dennis and what he did at Ohio State, he was the primary recruiter for the quarterback position. And, obviously the quarterbacks that they brought in there, you don't need to go through them. They've been
pretty
good.
Special,
so, So Utah is taking steps to really kind of help themselves at that quarterback position.
And we had one from Eric. Is Utah the favorite to win the Big 12? I would imagine they are in the top 3.
Yeah, according to most, you look at the win total projections for next year, they're top 2 with Kansas State right there. They're going to be top 3 according to most folks. And obviously with so much roster change for a lot of these programs, it provides a unique dynamic of just what exactly are these teams going to be, who's going to take that leap. Is there any Noah Fafita out there next season who comes in off the bench and turns the fortunes of a program around? There's always that sort of storyline, but I think coming into the season, Utah is going to be a top 2, top 3 type of favorite in the Big 12.
And then we got one last one from our buddy Eddie in Orange. Is it true that Cam Rising was David Woods' babysitter?
Absolutely. 100%. Cam, again, he's been around a long time. It's amazing that he's still, he has the hair, the facial hair. It's all still colorful and beautiful. David's got the gray coming in the beard.
Yeah.
I don't know how he does
I've
it.
aged terribly.
Terribly.
He's aging well.
Yeah. So it is true.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing the podcast with champions, at least for another year or two, so we get the sophomore and junior years of Cam Rising. So by 2027 we might not have the show.
I want to see how this little baby grows.
I wanted to ask you guys that. Are you guys gonna keep doing this? Because you guys, you guys dipped. You guys bounced. You left us.
We bailed. We did.
We had no choice in any of that. So the plan, it's I think we were so bad at creating a podcast for the Pac-12 that all these other podcasts about the Pac-12 sprouted up. They're like, wow, if these guys are doing it, we could do it too. Now everyone has this dilemma of well, now what the hell do we do?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, what we've decided to do is continue to cover the 12 teams, the formerly known as the Pac-12 teams, at least for this season. It's going to be harder to do are we breaking down Utah UCF the same way we would Utah Oregon State? No, but we'll talk about all those things. But it's almost like every week will be like an out of conference week where we did the out of conference games. It was okay, we're talking about 11, 12 games, and then in conference it's 5 or 6. Well, that's going to blow up. So it's going to be, the shows will be a little bit different. We'll see, but probably a little less in depth on everyone. But we still want to talk about the Pac-12 teams at least for one more year and kind of figure it out from there.
Yeah.
Man,
that means a lot.
Yeah.
This has been the podcast of choice for the Pac-12. I never listened to it, but I always read the reviews. The reviews were great.
Thanks, man.
I know you guys are doing a good job.
Appreciate
we
that.
Try, and the people are oh, you're and the good thing is for most of the run of we've been here, both USC and UCLA have been blowy, so we can make fun of the schools that we cover, so people aren't you're just a homer. What we're trashing.
No.
I
hate the school I cover. I just can't shake them.
Oh my God.
But thanks, man. We appreciate you coming in. It's fun stuff. And make sure you go over to utahzone.com. I don't think Amy was a subscriber or a Utah fan. Amy, get in there and subscribe. Come on. What are you doing?
What are we doing?
Come on, Amy.
What kind of game is this?
Eddie, you too.
Yeah, Eddie.
Eddie in Orange. I think he's a USC guy, but he loves I think he just loves
we don't discriminate. You can subscribe to Ute Zone whether USC, Oregon, whatever fan.
Nice. And Eric, he has got a duck logo. Eric was missing. He has a lot of respect for Utah. He was going to miss those games, so we had some kumbaya moments in the chat while this was all going on. So it is kind of sad.
Yep. It is.
I'm looking at every time we talk to Cartman or Shear, and now we're talking to you about the schedule, and it's just oh, well, there's that Arizona State game. There's they're kind of familiar, and then all these other teams. What the hell is this? It's just really weird.
Yep, it's a weird dynamic, man. It's obviously there's a certain level of excitement going into the new league, but man, there's a lot of pain, a lot of sadness saying goodbye to the Pac-12. It's been a great run, all around. All right.
Well, Steve Bartle, we really appreciate you coming in.
Appreciate you guys.
If you want to know more about the Utah Utes, make sure you go check out the Ute Zone over there. So, Steve, thanks again for coming in.
No problem.
Appreciate you, Steve.
Everyone else will be back in a minute. All righty. I think we're back. Just you and me.
Just us?
Just
us
us
kids?
Just us kids.
Wow. Here we are.
What'd you think? We got a lot of Ute talk.
That was a lot of Ute talk from Steve Bartle. Tremendous man, tremendous beard.
He does have a good beard.
It's a very good beard.
Wow.
It looks like mine used to look before I became an ancient mariner of 38.
I don't know how old Steve is.
So I was like lightly talking a little shit at somebody on Twitter the other day, and he responded with, "Well, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't really intentional. It was just something where I like said, oh yeah, I couldn't watch that because I was gonna cringe." But anyway, he comes back at me and he says, you could try to be nicer, instead of being like one of these 50-plus-year-old sports writers. And I'm like,
I'm 38.
Damn,
Mother.
He's not even intending that, and that's like brutal. Fuck.
Oh, nice.
38 years old. I just, I've had 2 children. I actually gave birth to them.
You did, yeah.
It was war on my body.
I forgot to talk to Steve. He put 5 things to love about the Utah football. Check it out over on Ute Zone. So that was a good piece. Cam Rising kind of leading the way. Also, the Big 12 Media Days are going to be in Vegas. So someone tweeted at me that was like, okay, now you have another excuse to go to Vegas. Like, I got to go to Big 12 Media Days because,
Got to cover your teams.
Yeah, got to cover the 4 corners.
When are they going to put Big 10 Media Days in Vegas?
I've made some inquiries. I think the guy that I knew that was working in the Big 10 office, I think he left. So I need to get some new contacts there. But I meant to go the last 2 years. I didn't end up going. I think I
wants to go to Indianapolis or whatever.
Yeah, I don't really want to do that. But they should definitely have it in Vegas.
They should also do the Big 10 tournament in Vegas. Nobody wants to go to Chicago for that.
True, yeah.
Vegas all of it in Vegas.
Everything should be Vegas.
Everything should be in Vegas.
I love that.
Come on.
All right. Well, we got a few questions to get to, but we got some our buddy, our pal, George K. George Kliavkoff. Do we have the I don't know if I have the Kliavkoff thing anymore.
Yeah, we don't need that.
I don't know that sound. He is out as of 11 days from now?
Yeah.
Yeah, March 1st. So he had a couple years left on his deal. The Pac-12 board, which is Oregon State and Washington State now, the board of directors announced that they have mutually agreed to part ways effective February 29th, 2024. So I guess 9 days from now.
Yeah.
And then the new leadership is Teresa Gould, who everyone had thought she would be the new commissioner of the Pac-12/2. I guess she gets to be the Pac-12 for a couple months, and then it's going to be the Pac-2. She's the first ever female commissioner of the in a Power 5 conference, Autonomy 5, they're calling it, which that's going away. But she gets to be that for a couple months, and then there won't be any Power 5 anymore. But yeah, so everyone thought that she would be the logical choice. You needed to get George out of there. He was just kind of hanging around, really hadn't spoken publicly. I don't know, like 6 months or something like that. It's been a while. But yeah, any thought? I mean, we knew it was coming. It's just kind of, it's finally here.
I thought it had already happened.
It's like one of those things like, oh, I thought he was already dead.
No, it feels like one of those situations like in Office Space where it's like, oh, we fixed the glitch. Nobody told him he was fired, but we have fixed the glitch where he was still getting paid. That's what happened here. Oh, that guy's still around?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We got to take care of that.
Well, you get like the celebrity death and you're like, oh, I thought he was already dead. Like that was one of those things.
I mean, they might have needed to pay a buyout. Who knows?
There was. I think he was getting like $3.5 million a year.
Well, that might have been, they were waiting to get the payout from the other bit of breaking news where they got a few extra million for the next couple of years as compensation for not staying in the playoff picture. But Kliavkoff, tenure undone by factors external to his control and also by factors under his control.
Yeah.
Didn't do a good job. Wasn't the job he signed up for. I feel for him personally, but at the same time,
I liked him.
But at the same time,
but he wasn't good.
He wasn't the guy to try to wrangle the already breaking apart conference and put it back together. Maybe if they'd hired him 3 or 4 years earlier and gotten rid of Larry Scott earlier, maybe he would have been the guy. But he wasn't. He wasn't the kind of transformative figure that they needed to fix what was broken. And that's really the long and the short of it. And now he's been hanging around for 7 months or whatever after the thing's already dead.
Yeah, the terms of the deal weren't disclosed. I think Wilner wrote about it, but he believed he was making like the liability was probably be in like $7 million range, and then you could split it up between the schools. So whatever they negotiated, I mean, he probably got less than that, but he still got some money and stuff. So yeah, this is just sort of like the inevitable thing that needed to happen. Eddie in Orange is saying that he just renewed his subscription to the P, so he's a sorry, Steve, he's a USC guy. So thanks, Eddie, for that. I don't know if Amy said if she's subscribing or not, so you got to get in there. Yeah, if whatever program you're a fan of, like if for some reason you like UCLA, I mean that seems really weird, but go over to Bro and sign up and get a membership there.
Do it.
You know, you should
subscribe.
Subscribe helps everybody. Helps everybody else out. Okay. Some other news. Did you see that Arizona has an athletic director?
Arizona Wildcats.
She was formerly at UNLV and then Missouri, and I believe got her law degree at Arizona. Desiree Reed Francois.
Hey, interesting. Tell me, where did she go and get her bachelor's degree?
Was it UCLA?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and tell me, was she available as an athletic director when UCLA was last hiring an athletic director?
Yes, she was. Like,
okay,
she took the Missouri job.
Interesting.
Her name came up for the USC search too.
Arizona just out here hiring people UCLA should have hired at all levels, all the time.
Yeah, they're doing. I think it's a really good hire to go from an SEC school to the Big 10, Big 12. I like that. So well done there. But yeah, so Arizona's got their athletic director.
Yes.
And another good hire, another hire that makes sense, that the folks in Westwood are going to go, why don't we do stuff like that?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned this earlier. So I haven't read this yet. I didn't even realize there was going to be financial compensation.
So you've been paying more attention to like what the actual format was supposed to be, and so apparently this is a change of some sort. But in any event, they're now doing 12 teams, and it's the 5 highest ranked conference title winners, and then 7 at large.
So it was 6 and 6 because there was a Power 5,
whatever,
and then you would get one group of 5.
Who gives a shit? Apparently, they spent months figuring this out because the Pac-12 was holding it up.
Right.
Washington
State was holding it up.
They're not calling it directly a quid pro quo, but Oregon State and Washington State are going to get a little extra money for the next couple of years.
Okay.
Because they agreed to stop holding up the process.
I believe they were holding out, and right. So they weren't going to say, well, the Pac-2 was going to get an automatic bid or whatever. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, who gives a fuck? It's going to be really stupid.
Okay, so they will get a little.
12 teams is super dumb.
Washington State and Oregon State, I feel like they're like looking for handouts wherever they can get it.
12 teams is the dumbest possible construction, right? We all agree.
As soon as I heard 12, I didn't like it, but the more I see it, I kind of like it. I kind of like the 4 buys. Like you get a bye week. I think that's kind of cool.
I think it's stupid. I think it's really dumb.
But I would like to see more.
You'd like to see more.
I'd like the bye teams to be able to have a home game too.
If you're doing a stupid tournament, embrace the stupid tournament. If you're trying to determine the best team, don't have a stupid tournament. Don't do this middle ground bullshit. Don't reward 4 teams. Like, why is the cutoff 4 teams? What if the difference between the 4th and the 5th team is way, way less than the difference between the 4th and the 3rd team?
Very likely.
Like, what are we doing here? It's stupid. Instead, just do 8 teams or do 16. I don't really care. It's all very stupid. But 12 was the absolute worst possible construction of this stupid thing.
Okay. I mean, I don't mind 12. I think, but I would like to see if you're 1, 2, 3, or 4, you should get a home game. Like right now, they don't, right? If you're 5, you get a home game. I'd like to see the top teams get a home game too. So maybe 16 would be better, and everyone that's good gets a home game, and then you kind of play in neutral sites from there.
Why?
Well, I mean, neutral sites, or at least for the semifinals. Like I don't mind if you do 2 rounds of home games. Like if you do a 16-team tournament, I think it'd be kind of fun. But as of now, right, it's like 8 versus 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's the at 8, right? You get a home game.
Yeah,
there.
but okay, so Michigan.
And then after that, I think it's neutral sites.
Look, Michigan doesn't want to play a fucking game in mid-December in Ann Arbor. Like, nobody wants to do that. Nobody. Not even the team that would be the home team. Like, just do it all in neutral sites, all of them in the southwestern desert. Who cares?
All of them in Vegas?
All of them. Like, have it just be
okay,
like
I would listen to that.
the tournament weekend where they all play their games in Vegas. Like
that would be freaking awesome.
Dude,
like
I mean,
Allegiant Stadium just from like 9 a.m.
If
until
you're
like,
going to borrow the stupidity and fun of the NCAA tournament, just do it like the NCAA tournament. None of this NIT bullshit of playing home games. No, all on neutral sites. And you get the neutral site closest to your home stadium if you're one of the higher ranked teams. Yeah, no,
okay.
No home games.
But everything in Vegas.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
All
All right, we got questions?
Let me see. We had one in the chat from, this is Amy again. She's very active. She was big into the Utah day. Who would you want to see as head coach for Utah?
I mean, I think the thing there is program continuity is probably the biggest factor with Utah, because I don't think it's the biggest factor when you don't have a successful program, but when you have a successful one, that's probably what you want. So I don't know if it's Scally. I mean, it feels like the whole texting slurs to people kind of got swept under the rug, but he did do that. Has his, I don't know, judgment improved considerably since then? I mean, that was only in 2013. That's way past the time when anybody should have been, well, nobody should have ever been texting slurs, but kind of got to a point there where it's, that's a real. And I don't know that we ever saw the text messages themselves. I don't know what slur.
I think all that stuff would start to come out, and it would just be kind of murky.
Maybe we did. I honestly don't remember. But I mean, if he passes some sort of actual vetting, maybe it's him. But I would think just you'd want continuity from Whittingham, because the program has been awesome.
It has been
years.
awesome. But if you don't have, like, this is for sure the heir apparent, and if there's questions around Scally, and I know there's some Utah fans that wouldn't want to see that. I mean, bringing in another hard-nosed coach from outside, that, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind that either. I mean, someone that could embrace the culture that he established. But if you don't have someone, it's just basically you're just doing a very light version of Whittingham. And I think I'd rather just bring someone that has their own program building ideals, but also could embrace everything Whittingham did.
You just have USC PTSD.
What do you mean?
Because you saw this happen. You saw
trying to, like,
Pete Carroll and then Lane Kiffin.
Anyone that was associated.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just because you're associated with Kyle Whittingham doesn't mean you're going to be good. Like, Scally would probably make the most sense if there wasn't that kind of.
It's basically a question of is it Boise State or is it USC? Like, is it the kind of job where the only thing that matters is the culture and continuing the culture and the recruiting apparatus and all that kind of stuff? Or was Kyle Whittingham such a transformative figure that you're not going to duplicate him?
Yeah.
I lean more towards the former, not the latter with him. I think Kyle Whittingham is a really good coach, but Utah's been a pretty good program, and they're a pretty good program under Urban Meyer before they went to Kyle Whittingham. I think it's sort of like the almost the Oregon thing, where they didn't have a bad coach from basically the end of the Rich Brooks era on. It was just kind of inheriting the apparatus and doing all that kind of stuff. So, and I don't know, Utah's not at that level. Like, it's not Phil Knight benefactor. That's the biggest factor. But I think that continuity feels more important there than it does with, like, what USC went through, because Pete Carroll was, in a lot of ways, the program. Like what he was doing, his energy, his recruiting ability, his personal like drive and verve and all that kind of stuff was such a big factor. I don't know that Kyle Whittingham is that like essential to the process. I think he's a guy who started the process, but if somebody's a real bought into that, they can make this work too.
Yeah. All right, we got a voicemail, and then I think that'll be it.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Kirk. In plenty of past episodes, you guys have talked about, from a business standpoint, how well you guys do at your 247 sites when your team has a job change. And in this most recent round, Dave, I was curious, from a business standpoint, do you wish the search went on a little bit longer? Would have that done anything business-wise, or would the bigger difference have been had the coaching search taken place in November instead of February? Just kind of curious to see what it's like from that angle and what you experienced this time around. Thanks, guys.
Great question. First, yes, would have preferred a longer search from a strictly business angle. Second, I don't know how much of a factor it would have been November versus February. I think the November one, the only reason it would have been a factor is because recruiting is in full swing at that point. So on top of the hire itself, you then get a lot of news drip immediately about like, oh, they're going out and offering this guy. They're bringing in this whole crew of guys on official visits. February, you don't get that. So I think all things considered, for so many different reasons, UCLA should have been doing this in November and not in February. Huge own goal kicked by the UCLA administration. But I mean, I think with there's a point at which a coaching search goes on too long, and it starts to have diminishing returns. But even those diminishing returns are still pretty good for business. So like a 3 or 4 day search is not, still good, but it's not ideal.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely changed. I mean, there's a lot going on at the end of the season, and just so much gets piled on top of each other. It used to be better when February was the signing period. Now you're doing like all the signing stuff while the bowl game's going on and coaching searches are happening. There's just a lot kind of going on at once. So maybe having a search outside of that normal window, there's some benefits there, but it's also, it's just, we're in a weird time. It's just things have changed. I think the whole industry's changed, and the timelines for things have changed. And I think there's a not insignificant group of fans that are not happy with the overall state of the sport in college football. And I think you've talked about this before, where you could be selling your soul and you're making more money now, but are you losing in the long term because people are not into the way this sport is going? And I guess time will tell for that one.
That's true.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap things up.
Was Eric's not from? Did we already do that one?
Which one was Eric?
It's the one from February 15th.
Oh, we didn't do the email. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, we haven't done. There's 2 emails.
Oh, is there 2? Okay.
Yeah, one just came in.
Okay.
All right, I'll read Eric's. Big Ten Network. Hi, guys. I was happy to see that Chip finally convinced someone to hire him away from UCLA, and I'm holding out hope for Coach Foster. I got the email from UCLA announcing the hire in the press conference, which indicated that the press conference would be on the Pac-12 network. At the start of the press conference, I switched channels to the Pac-12 network, but to my surprise, not really surprised, it was not on. Instead, the replay of the Cal versus USC basketball game was on. However, do you know what channel was actually prepared to carry the press conference? It was the Big Ten Network. The Big Ten Network even had a mini pre-press conference show. I was shocked. At the end of the press conference, the Pac-12 Network immediately resumed showing the replay of the Cal versus USC basketball game, while the Big Ten Network had a mini post-press conference show with in-studio analysis of the speeches by Jarmond and Foster. The press conference was likely the very last live, non-sports broadcast by the Pac-12 Network, and it was handled very horribly. This just summed up the Pac-12 Network failure. Lastly, the football uniforms that were on display at the Foster press conference had the Big Ten logo patch on them instead of the Pac-12 logo patch, and it was cool, yet sad to see. I'll miss the Pac-10, Pac-12 conference, the horrible reffing, and Pac-12 after dark. Thanks, Eric F. P.S. Since you guys are having a guest come in to discuss the now defunct Pac-12 schools, what are the chances of having Tracy come in as the guest for UCLA? I know Dave covers UCLA, but it would be great to have all three of you guys on one podcast in a way to truly put the Pac-12 conference to bed.
We already talked UCLA last week.
That's true.
But we could, at the end, we could bring Tracy on too.
Yeah. So for the Pac-12 network, Big 10 network. Did I say Big 12 at the beginning? I think I did. Big 10 network.
Okay.
It's the B1G. Can we stop saying that? It's stupid. It's Big 10. Just call it the Big 10. Anyway.
B1G. I just put that up there.
Anyway, one thing I will say, in fairness to the Pac-12 network, they have been shuttering things all year, and they have been really, really stripping things down all year beyond what they had already been doing. Yes, they're horrible. Yes, they've done a bad job with like a lot of kind of behind the scenes production stuff, but they don't even have like studio apparatus set up in some places anymore. Like they're having to do some very stripped down things as they kind of put this whole thing to bed. So wouldn't give them too hard of a time.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm curious to see what, like, even at the Pac-12. Oh, was it Pac-12 championship game? They didn't have like a show. Like there were some stuff going. I talked to Yogi and everything, and it was just,
Well, they used to have like studio space set up on campuses, like to do like quick hitters and stuff. But now they're having to. Like, they used to have like live remote setups where like a coach could be on like with a background and stuff.
Yeah,
they even got rid of a lot of that stuff. Like it's not very good.
No, and just trying to keep everything alive for the next few months. I mean, these are people's lives that you're messing with. Like they have jobs. If they can get a job somewhere else, it's like how do you have everyone there long enough to keep the lights on and keep everything working? I think there's a big challenge there. So it'll be interesting to see what Washington State, Oregon State do, what the assets there and what they can do with it. I'm not sure. We have one other email from Colt, future baby names. Ryan and Dave, great news. My wife and I just found out we are expecting our first baby. Well, congratulations. We've used a lot of applause.
Very proud. Very happy.
Very, very awesome. Congratulations to you. In place of traditional names, can you give us both a boy version and a girl version of the most Pac-12 name possible? Thanks for the help. Keep up the great work, Colt. And he says, P.S. Can't wait to start the baby's college fund with our winnings in Vegas at the craps table.
All right, so first you start with all of the Pac-12 cities because city names work. My kids are Berkeley and Abilene, so the first one is actually a Pac-12 name right there. So there's one. But there's also, you can do Pullman for a boy. Not a great name, but you can do it.
Okay.
You can do Eugene.
Oh, yeah.
It's old. It's an old name, but you could do it.
Kind of nerdy. Connotations.
Corvallis is interesting. That feels like it could go either way. That feels like it could be a girl or a boy.
Yeah.
You can't do Salt Lake.
I think Corvallis is kind of badass.
Yeah, you can't do Salt Lake City. That's not real.
No.
Boulder.
Maybe not Boulder.
Boulder, if you're really going for that with a boy's name, you could do. Berkeley, I recommend it. My daughter likes it. Stanford, you could just name your kid Stanford. That would be obnoxious. You can't do Los Angeles.
No.
You can't do Westwood. What is USC? Figueroa? Figueroa would be interesting.
Oh, Figueroa's a good one. Yeah.
Tucson doesn't work. Tempe is interesting, but no, I don't think that works.
I know a Tempe.
You know a Tempe?
One of my buddies married a Tempe.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know if it's spelled the same way.
Then you could also go like kind of esoteric. You could go like Evergreen. You could go Pacifica. You could go, some sort of like ocean or sea type thing.
Palouse? No.
Ooh, the Palouse. Palusi? Ooh, Palusi.
Palusi.
Yeah, just go with a Lucy and PA at the front. Palusi.
Okay.
You like that?
I do. I came up with it.
I kind of like that. I mean, you can go Willamette.
Oh, yeah.
Or you could just go Willa for a girl.
Willa, yeah.
That's kind of pretty. And then you're getting the Willamette. It's not Willamette. It's not Willamette. All right, you friggin' Oregonians. It's Willamette. We've all seen the word. Don't make me pronounce it in your fucked up way.
Every time I say it, it's wrong, so I never even say it anymore. You know?
I mean, there's a lot. You could then go into like the cups. You could go territorial. No. You could go
Civil.
Victory.
Civil.
Victory.
Victory. Okay.
Yeah. You could go
Puget.
Apple.
Okay.
Like
Apple's a name.
Gwyneth Paltrow's kid.
Yeah.
You could go civil.
For Civil War.
Yeah. You could do big.
What about Axe?
Big game.
Axe.
Oh wow. What's his last name? Big Game Bush. That'd be amazing.
I love it.
You could go Axe. You could go Bell. I mean, there's a lot of really good options. Obviously, I mean, we're champions. Champion.
Yeah.
Just champion. What about champion?
Champions.
That kind of works.
I don't know.
And then you could also go funny. You could go Larry Scott. George Kliavkoff. You could go Don James. You could go Terry Donahue. You could go Pete Carroll. You know, there's lots of different options here. So, you know, just really expand your scope. Think about all the different ways. But, you know, if I had to pick, I'd pick a city name. They're okay.
That's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about mascots? Like, could you do? I don't think the mascots probably wouldn't work.
No, I mean you could go Joe Bruin.
Bruins, like Bruin.
Oh yeah, Bruin. Trojan. No, Trojan.
Not
doesn't-
Trojan.
Well,
Bruin.
there's some people named like Trajan. Well, like
Okay.
in ancient times. Cardinal. No. Bear. I mean, I've seen bears.
Bear. Yeah, but you could do bear.
Wildcat. No. Sun Devil. That might be a little extreme.
Leave it to Beaver. We have
Beef. Ute. Buffalo. Husky.
Sun Devil would work.
Probably don't name a girl Husky.
No. It's kind of sexist of you. By
Cougar. Duck. Duck feels like a nickname. Maybe you go with like a Doug and you call him Duck.
Sun Devil. Like, would that be an actual name? Like someone like, hey, I'm Sun
I think
Devil.
you'd have to put it all together and go like Sundeville.
Sun Devil. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, you could do that too. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good options out there.
Cole, hopefully we helped. But the fact that you actually have like a Berkeley in your household is pretty crazy.
Well, and that was our first, and so joking like with the second, like what Pac-12 city name should we do for this one? Yeah.
Great. You've mentioned Vegas a lot. We haven't mentioned so Dave and I will both be there starting March 13th. I will be the 13th. You are coming the 14th for the final ever Pac-12 basketball tournament.
And we're joining forces.
Yes.
And by this we mean we have allowed the No Truck Stops podcast to do 100% of the planning.
Yes.
And by joining forces, we basically agreed to not have a conflicting get-together. But in any event, we're going to meet up the Friday before. So before the semifinal games, which I believe start at like 5 or 6, we're going to meet up at a venue somewhat close to Planet Hollywood. Details to come on that. If you are interested in coming, we are going to. What are we going to do? Are we
I think
going
you
to
have to
share
email us.
Yeah, email us,
Or you can DM us on Twitter.
because I think what we're trying to do is set up like I don't know, like 25 to 30 people reservation. Because like when we did this 2 years ago, we're a football show. Like 10 people showed up. So if you're interested, email us at pac12podcast@gmail.com. We will share some sort of form for you to fill out. But yeah, if you want to come. If you want to eulogize our dearly beloved Pac-12 with us and the No Truck Stops pod, please indicate your interest via email.
Yeah, they got a reservation. There's limited space, so it'll be once we fill up, we fill up. This is a little different. They're more organized than what we would be. We're just saying, hey, show up here, and maybe it could have been 50 people, it could have been 2, we don't know. But they're a little more organized, so that's good. So, but yeah, we'd like to meet up with everybody over there. It'll be before the semifinal games, so it'll be Friday. Hopefully, you guys will be there. It'd be fun to get drunk and have some fun.
Well, you can get drunk because USC sucks.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Mad ass at basketball.
They beat Utah this week.
However, there is a decent chance that UCLA will have to play Friday night.
Wait, USC beat Utah and UCLA lost to Utah, right? Like that.
Correct.
Happened.
UCLA lost twice to Utah. They lost by 46 the first time they played. And then this last time they played, they were probably going to win, but then their star freshman guard, Sebastian Mack, decided that he was going to try to collapse the trachea of Utah's center, Brandon Carlson. He threw an elbow. So he was running through a screen at half court, and he takes his elbow and does this, where he's like almost jumping to try to get it as high up on this guy. Because he's like,
that's incidental.
Carlson's
right?
like one of these big galoots. He's like 6'10" or something. And so he tries to throw the elbow, and he's like 6'3". So, like, if you want to throw an elbow and you're 6'3" at a 6'10" guy, there's a much, much better place to hit him. It's a lot easier to hit, and also your likelihood of killing the person that you're swinging your elbow at is much, much lower. Much, much lower. More nut shots is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you've already brought that up with BYU.
Utah's used to it. They play BYU every year.
Yes.
If you hit them in the balls, it's fair game. Lots of sports you hit people in the balls. Water polo, famously, all that's going on underneath the water
is terrible.
Is punching, kicking, grabbing, twisting,
scratching,
nuts, constantly, just nuts. There is so much nut violence in water polo. It's fine. If you hit a Utah player in the nuts, it's almost like, it's like coming home. Oh, we're playing BYU again? No, it's UCLA. But if you hit them in the throat, they might die on the floor.
You don't want that.
You don't want to kill somebody. So general rule of thumb, if you want to do violence to a player in a game, hit them in the balls.
Gotcha. But yeah, it should be some fun in Vegas. Just to give people right now, what's the odd? Like, so the only teams that are any good really in the Pac-12, Arizona is good, and Washington State's pretty good. Is that where we are?
Arizona is like objectively good. Everyone else you gotta make some allowances for. Washington State's gotten really hot in the last month and a half.
Okay.
They're probably going to make the NCAA tournament. Everyone else is in varying stages of maybe. Colorado probably has the next best chance, but I think they might still have not won a game on the road this year.
No, they just
yeah, they just
beat USC in double overtime.
Did. I wasn't even meaning that. That wasn't even intentional.
Yeah.
But UCLA was playing really well up until they tried to kill the Utah guy. They didn't actually try to kill him. It was a high elbow, and I'm being facetious. But they were playing pretty well until then. But they probably needed to more or less win out to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large. Now anybody could make it winning the Pac-12 tournament.
Gotcha.
So that's where the fun is involved. And I will say, your stupid Trojans have been playing a little bit better since Isaiah Collier came back.
They got some guys back, I think. Yeah, we'll see. But they lost in double overtime in a game they probably should have won. But yeah, so this kind of sucks for Oregon State and Washington State, right? Because they're going to get all of the NCAA units going forward, because it's
this is the year to get the units.
Yeah, there's no units coming unless Arizona wins the title. But
they need somebody outside of Arizona and Washington State to win the Pac-12 tournament.
And then there'll be 3 teams.
Then you'll have 3 teams. But Arizona is probably going to be prohibitive favorite in that tourney.
Yeah,
and they usually show really well.
They do show up for that. It's Arizona fans everywhere.
Yeah, it's Tucson North.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, so we got some Arizona. So all you Shear fans, and if you're Arizona fans, hopefully you can come to the meetup there, because we know there's a lot of you out there. All right. Well, I guess that's going to wrap things up. Fun stuff. Yeah, let us know. Send us an email, pac12podcast@gmail.com, or DM us at Pac12 Podcast on the Twitters. If you are interested in coming to the meetup, it'll be Friday afternoon, March 15th. For David Woods, I am Ryan Abraham. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye. Do nut violence.